Hey everyone, welcome to the bonus show. So another phase of the Alex Jones civil defamation lawsuit has concluded, and we found out yesterday that the InfoWars host is going to have to pay out $4.1 million in damages, in compensatory damages specifically, to the Sandy Hook family whom he defamed. The next stage in the trial is to determine how much jurors think that Jones should have to pay the family for punitive damages. So the idea being that the $4.1 million that they've already awarded, that can go towards their moving costs, bills for therapy, security, any costs that they've incurred, plus some pain and suffering damages. The next stage is going to be punitive damages, which is more out of principle. It's more meant to teach other people in his position a lesson not to go out there and spread lies about people. So the $4.1 million figure I found to be quite underwhelming, given that plaintiffs' attorneys were asking for $150 million. And in contrast, Jones's attorneys were asking for $8 in total, $1 each for each damaged family member. Now, I didn't expect them to award $150 million. I didn't necessarily think they'd split the difference either, but I thought it would be, I don't know, more in the ballpark of $50 million, something like that, because we know that Alex Jones does have the money to pay it out, although he claims he's bankrupt. We'll see how that goes. 10 of the jurors agreed to the verdict out of 12, which is the minimum that you need in a civil case like this in Texas. Let's hear a little bit of the verdict getting read.
Question 1A, $50,000. Question 1B, $10,000. Question 1C, $50,000. Question 1D, no dollars. Question 2A, $1.5 million. Question 2B, $500,000. Question 3A, $1.5 million. And question 3B, $500,000. Is this your verdict, the 10 of you who signed it? So say each and all of you, all 10 of you.
Yes.
All right. Would the attorneys care to inspect the verdict?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right. Then I will accept this as a verdict of the jury and order that the clerk enter it upon the minutes of the court.
Now, as they move on to the punitive damages phase of the trial, this again is going to be dependent on how much Jones has an ability to pay out in the first place, because you can say that someone owes $1 billion. If they don't have $1 billion, then what good is the judgment anyway for you? And we also know that Jones tried to file for bankruptcy and said that his company is bankrupt as a way to get out of this mess. Doesn't seem like that's really working for him. We also found out that because of the trial, back when all this was going on, InfoWars was grossing about $800,000 a day. So that certainly suggests that he was making, at least back then, tens of millions of dollars a year. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's still making that amount, because we know that he's gotten canceled since then, so maybe his income is way down, but because of all the money that he makes from his scam supplement sales and his ad revenue and merchandise revenue and all this different stuff, you have to imagine that he at least has a few $1 million lying around that could potentially go to the victim's family members. Jurors, before they reach their next decision, will hear from the parent's economic expert on Jones's net worth and that of his company. My hope is that the $4.1 million judgment, which we initially got, because it does seem like a lowball number, that was just calculated as an assessment of the costs that the family incurred to hire security, to pay for moving and all these different things, and that when they hit him with the punitive damages, that's when they're really going to throw the book at him. But we'll have to wait and see. Judging on the pace of this trial, we'll probably find out what the decision is next week. It seems like it's going to happen pretty soon, and you best believe we'll be following it. There was an interesting piece this week in NPR about how over the last few weeks or so, Joe Biden has been using the T word a lot more often. The T word, of course, being Trump. In the early days of the Biden administration, there was this concerted effort not to mention Trump by name. They would only vaguely refer to him as, my predecessor. One time Biden called him the MAGA king. Well, recently, Joe Biden has been using Trump's name a lot more often, including when speaking virtually to a law enforcement group about January 6th. He said the police were heroes that day. Donald Trump lacked the courage to act. The shift is coming in conjunction with the upcoming midterms, of course, and there seems to be a recognition from the Biden team that you can't just keep dismissing Trump anymore. You can't just keep calling him the former guy. He still is the leader of the Republican Party, after all. You're the leader of the Democratic Party, and so you have to play ball. He's having this significant role in the midterms. Trump has all these endorsements and these rallies, and it's very, very possible that in 2024 the matchup is once again Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. So you have to face the guy head on. You can't be so dismissive as maybe you were able to get away with in the first year and a half of your presidency. This reminds me of when you have a boxing champion or a UFC champion, and there's all this talk about who the next contender is going to be for the belt, and they don't want to mention anyone specifically by name because they don't want to bring that person up to their level. But then once the opponent is announced, once it's been determined, you can't avoid it, right? You have to start giving them the respect because you'd look cowardly if you didn't mention their name, and you know that they're coming for what you have. So you have to have that mutual respect, and you have to say what their name is, right? At the very least. Democratic strategist Jesse Ferguson said about Biden's new tone, President Biden is not running against the former guy. He is setting up a midterm contrast against the current and most likely future leader of the Republican Party. So I do think that the shift is necessary. It is subtle. But we are back in campaign mode after all now. The first year and a half, you were able to dismiss him, but now that time is over. Biden can't just treat Trump like he's only in the rearview mirror anymore. He has to treat him like the threat he is, not only to him and his presidency, but also to democracy and the American system of doing things to begin with. So that's going to start by calling Trump by his name, and I thought this was actually quite interesting to learn about. CPAC is happening this weekend in Texas. Day one of the conference took place yesterday, and it will be full of speeches from people like Glenn Beck, Ted Cruz, Sean Hannity, and the headliner, Donald Trump. But yesterday, to kick things off, we heard from Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who spoke at the conference, and boy, was it disconcerting. Orban is this authoritarian leader. He's part of the right-wing surge that we've seen in parts of Europe over the last few years. He opposes a, quote, mixed-race society. He'll make these anti-Semitic remarks from time to time. He opposes same-sex marriage, and so it's no surprise that he was welcomed in with open arms at CPAC. Let's look at some of the most bigoted, backwards, and wacky moments from the speech. Real quick, here's this little clip of him claiming that a Christian politician cannot be racist. This is in response to him recently saying that, quote, "We are all willing to mix with one another, but we do not want to become people of mixed race. But it's okay, guys, because he's a Christian, so therefore, by definition, he cannot be racist."
Don't worry, a Christian politician cannot be racist.
So it's a certain get-out-of-jail-free card. How about that? He also said that it's impossible for him or other Hungarian politicians to be racist or anti-Semitic because they recently passed a law banning such viewpoints.
Instead, I tell you the truth. In Hungary, we introduced a zero-tolerance policy on racism and anti-Semitism, so accusing us is fake news, and those who make these claims are simply idiots. They are the industrial fake news corporation.
Now, how is that for Orwellian? And obviously the CPAC audience loving it there. They loved the use of Trump's fake news term. Next, we got into the culture war issues, starting with opposition to same-sex marriage, which we thought up until a few months ago Republicans had moved on from, but now they're emboldened because of the Roe versus Wade decision to go after other social issues. Let's take a look at what Orban had to say about same-sex marriage, and perhaps more importantly, how the conservative crowd reacted.
Hungary shall protect the institution of marriage as the union of one man and one woman. Family ties shall be based on marriage or the relationship between parents and children. To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion.
A standing ovation for Viktor Orban after he delivered that message. How about that? Honestly, let that be a message to gay Republicans who thought that they were in the clear to vote Republican following the Obergefell decision. It turns out that they're still willing to fight this culture war issue, and the same-sex marriage issue may not be as settled as we once thought. and also the trans commentary, the homophobic, transphobic trope that all they want to do is groom children, which that has been making a resurgence recently as well. So this is a sick guy. He's speaking to a sick audience at a sick event. And if you want more CPAC coverage, live reaction, David is going to be streaming much of the coverage of this event over the weekend. He'll have Donald Trump's speech and speeches from many other people. So be sure to check that out on the YouTube channel. He'll be live streaming. And other than that, we'll see you next week with some more shows and more bonus shows.